Daniel's smile was the most convincing mask money could ever buy. Think about it for a second. What drives a man who, if he wanted, could buy the entire restaurant where he works to sit down at a table and quit his job, wearing a worn apron, stained with sauce and grease from other people's dishes, to serve people who barely look at his face? This isn't a story about charity, nor about humility. It's about a secret. It's about a kind of pain that no amount of money could erase. Daniel moved through the dining room like a necessary ghost. The restaurant, with its low lighting and aroma of expensive spices mixed with the acidic smell of disinfectant, was the perfect stage for his strange performance. He carried a heavy tray, gliding between the mahogany tables, while high society couples debated which French wine best paired with the octopus carpaccio. His shoes, with their worn soles, made a rhythmic, tired sound that seemed to accompany the slow beat of his own heart. On the outside, he was just Daniel, the minimum-wage punctual waiter. Inside, he was an unsolved equation, a mystery. You, watching now, need to know something. In an international bank account, kept under lock and key, lay Daniel's legacy, a fortune exceeding $5 million, a millionaire among us. His colleagues subtly despised him. Pedro, the chef, called him mummy for being silent. Sophia, the receptionist, never looked him in the eye, only at the coffee stain on his apron. This rejection, however, no longer hurt him. It fueled him. It was proof that his disguise was working. The armor of anonymity was intact. But for how long could he bear the weight of being invisible? There's a detail that few people notice about Daniel, and it's there that the incongruity becomes acute. He wears a simple digital watch every day under the sleeve of his worn shirt. It's not a diamond-encrusted Patek Philippe, as one might expect, but a cheap plastic Casio. What everyone ignores is that he doesn't use the watch to tell the time. He uses it to mark time. The time he has left. The time until the big event. He looks at the dial every 10 minutes, as if waiting for a signal, a siren. And what he was waiting for wasn't a raise, but the arrival of someone. Tonight, Daniel's mental ticking was faster. He was wiping a red wine stain from an expensive fur coat, and the narration whispers, the smell of money and guilt never mix well. He had received a coded message on his phone hidden in the closet, a message of only 3 words, confirming what he feared and expected. The person he was looking for, the reason he wore this disguise of humiliating servitude, the key piece of his intricate plan of revenge and redemption, would finally come to the restaurant. His fortune, his power, his secret, everything was about to be detonated in a single explosive encounter. The question, dear viewers, is inevitable and frightening. Why would such a rich man endure so much humiliation? Why would he put his own life second? Think about it. What would be the one thing, the one reason so important that would make a millionaire give up his comfort, his dignity and his money for a while, living as if he were poor just to meet a stranger? Leave a comment below with the dark secret you think Daniel is hiding. The night shift dragged on with the cruel slowness of agony. Daniel knew that every minute under that disguise was a step toward his goal, but it was also a constant reminder of what he had lost and what had forced him into this double life. No one in the restaurant suspected that this man, with his hands marked by the heat of the dishes and the smell of mild soap, was actually a millionaire who had secretly rewritten the story of his fortune. But the secret, like a rough diamond, weighed heavily. His refuge was the pantry, a cramped and dimly lit place in the back, which smelled of potatoes and garlic. There, for 30 seconds, Daniel was just Daniel. He closed his eyes and remembered the contrast, the aroma of freshly ground coffee in his hilltop mansion, the absolute silence that money could buy. And then he returned to reality, where the clatter of cutlery and Chef Pedro's complaints pulled him back into the charade. This incongruity was the engine that kept him going, the fuel for his pain. He wasn't there for humiliation, but for a kind of justice that could only be achieved through invisibility. Commanded. Continuing the narrative flow and the growing tension, the Midas-like screenwriter begins developing topic 2, deepening Daniel's pain and presenting the first obstacle to his plan. Topic 2. The night shift dragged on with the cruel slowness of agony. Daniel knew that every minute under that disguise was a step toward his goal, but it was also a constant reminder of what he had lost and what had forced him into this double life. No one in the restaurant suspected that this man, with his hands marked by the heat of the dishes and the smell of mild soap, was actually a millionaire who had secretly rewritten the story of his fortune. But the secret, like a rough diamond, weighed heavily, resuming the information gap. His refuge was the pantry, a cramped and dimly lit place in the back that smelled of potatoes and garlic. There, for 30 seconds, Daniel was just Daniel. He would close his eyes and remember the contrast. The aroma of freshly ground coffee in his hilltop mansion, the absolute silence that money could buy. And then he would return to reality, where the clatter of cutlery and Chef Pedro's complaints would pull him back into the charade. This incongruity was the engine that kept him going, the fuel for his pain. He wasn't there for humiliation, but for a kind of justice that could only be obtained through invisibility. Intense visuals and emotional peaks. A crucial suit, which he kept under lock and key, was the reason for his wealth. His first million didn't come from a stroke of luck or an inheritance. It came from an act of desperation, a high-risk gamble taken in a moment of profound loss, a sacrifice that made him swear revenge. That oath was the only thing that gave meaning to the ticking of his cheap watch. He couldn't fail, not after everything. That night, however, an unforeseen event threatened to unravel the charade. A foreign tourist couple, who seemed to have gotten lost on their way to a 5-star hotel, recognized Daniel, not from the restaurant, but from an old news report, a forgotten page of a business magazine, where Daniel appeared smiling next to a private plane. The man with a heavy accent tried to approach him. "Aren't you Mr. Guerra, the famous millionaire who made his fortune with clean energy technology?" It was the question Daniel feared most. Panic was instantaneous. Daniel used his experience as a waiter to get away with it. A forced smile, an exaggerated country accent, and an apology, claiming he looked like many people. He pretended to spill a glass of water, distracting them and quickly sending them to another section. But the damage was done. The seed of doubt had been planted, and with each step he took to keep his secret, the risk of being exposed grew greater. He looked at his Casio and thought, time is running out. The person he needed to find, the reason for all his suffering and wealth, had to arrive soon before the mask fell. After all, if money was the tool of his revenge, exposure would be his downfall. What do you think Daniel would do if he were completely unmasked before achieving his goal? Would he run away, or would he use his fortune to silence the truth? Share your theory in the comments below, and don't miss the next topic, because the real reason behind this fortune and the reason why Daniel uses this humiliating disguise is even more shocking than you imagine. Night swallowed the stars and the city, but Daniel couldn't afford to tire himself out. The attempt at unmasking in topic 2 had left a bitter metallic taste in his mouth, proof that at any moment the house of cards of his disguise could crumble. He thought about the incongruity of his life. His money could buy the discretion of 1,000 bodyguards, but he chose the fragility of anonymity. This choice wasn't masochism, it was a Cold War tactic. The cleaning after closing was the loneliest. While the strong smell of disinfectant rose and mixed with the remnants of expensive perfume, Daniel found solace in an object kept in the inside pocket of his apron, a small, rusty keychain with the almost faded engraving of a name, Sophia. This wasn't the name of the receptionist who ignored him, but that of his younger sister, lost years ago, the real reason, the catalyst for his fortune and his suffering. Daniel's wealth wasn't a celebration, it was a hunting tool. The story of Daniel and Sophia was one of those tales of family betrayal that few dare to tell. They were orphans, young and poor, living in the shadow of extreme need. Daniel's first money, the seed capital of his immense fortune, came from a decision he never forgave. He had accepted a cruel loan with extortionate interest from someone who promised Sophia protection. This person, this loan shark disguised as a businessman, not only charged triple the amount, but also used Daniel's desperation to force him to do illicit things that tarnished the beginning of his empire. When Daniel finally had enough to pay off the debt, Sophia had disappeared, taken by the promises of wealth and security made by this same predator. Millionaire Daniel Guerra wasn't waiting tables, he was investigating. The restaurant, he had discovered, was the preferred haunt of a specific social circle, the same circle that, he believed, housed the person responsible for Sophia's disappearance. The keychain was his compass, a reminder that his fortune, his money, would only truly be his when he found his sister. He had information that the loan shark, the predator, the man who had used him, was now a powerful investor and was frequenting the place under a new identity. Suddenly the silence of the night is broken. Daniel was gathering the last napkins when his gaze froze on an empty table, table number 16. There, forgotten under the flower arrangement, was a business card of fine marble, with a name and logo of a financial conglomerate that Daniel recognized with a shudder. The lettering on that card, the shape of that capital S, it was identical to the handwriting he had last seen on the promissory note that almost ruined his life and took his sister away. It was him. The predator was one step away. Now, Daniel no longer needed to search. He only needed to wait. The hunt was over, and the predator had fallen into the trap of his own luxury. But if the person who ruined him is a powerful tycoon, what do you think Daniel would do with his money and newfound power? Would he kill him? Would he imprison him? Or would he do something far more cruel and sophisticated? Do you think his sister, Sophia, might still be alive? Leave your opinion on Daniel's plan in the comments below and follow the next topic, because the final confrontation is much closer than you imagine, and the person Daniel is looking for is unexpected. Dawn was giving way to a weak sun, but Daniel's mind was in turmoil. The discovery of the business card at table 16 in the previous topic had accelerated the countdown on his Casio watch. He was no longer looking for a shadow. He had a name, a company, and a date to arrive. The predator who stole his sister Sophia was coming, but what Daniel didn't know was that the confrontation would be delivered to him unexpectedly through an unlikely ally, arrogance. Daniel, the millionaire disguised as a waiter, watched the movement in the kitchen, feeling the heat and pressure of the steam. He remembered a phrase his mentor had said before he made his first million. "Money is the best disguise for those who don't want to be seen, Daniel. Use it to make yourself invisible until it's time to be everything." He was now in the final stretch, and the invisibility was beginning to tighten like a bulletproof vest. The waiter was the shield, but the person behind it was hungry for justice. The boss announced the arrival of a VIP client for lunch, the young and powerful Erica Vasconcelos. Erica was a rising star in the financial conglomerate, the protégé of the investor Daniel was hunting, and by pure irony of fate, Daniel was assigned as the exclusive waiter for her table. The coincidence was too great to be the work of chance. It seemed like destiny serving revenge on a silver platter. Daniel felt the cold steel of Sophia's keychain against his skin. Erica arrived in a luxury car worth more than the entire restaurant. She stepped out of the vehicle with calculated arrogance, her gaze fixed and cold, as if the world were merely a stage for her performance. She wasn't the main target, but she was the predator's right hand. And the millionaire Daniel knew that to get to the boss, he would have to disarm his protégé. His first interaction with Erica, his first contact with unbridled greed, would be the litmus test for his performance. He would have to endure the humiliation without his mask trembling. As Daniel meticulously arranged the silverware, he heard her voice for the first time, loud, shrill, calling the receptionist by the wrong name and rudely demanding the best table. The contrast between Erica's world, where money bought the right to be rude, and Daniel's world, where dignity was worth more than his entire bank balance, was painful. He realized that the humiliation wouldn't come from an accident, but from sadistic pleasure. He approached her table, his apron clean, his face neutral, his soul alert. Erica barely glanced at him. She reached out, not to take the menu, but to point out a tiny stain on the white linen tablecloth. "Waiter," she said with sharp disdain, "can you see this? It's dirt. And dirt in my field of vision is unacceptable. Have it changed immediately and make sure it doesn't happen again. I demand perfection, and your salary, by the way, isn't paid for me to tolerate mediocrity." Daniel tilted his head without saying a word, but inside the millionaire was smiling. He had her exactly where he wanted her. The game had just begun. But the question remains, will Daniel endure the humiliation without reacting, allowing Erica's arrogance to become the driving force behind his own downfall? And what exactly is Erica's role in the tragedy that took Daniel's sister? Is her money the key to her past or just a cruel distraction? Comment below if you think Daniel will drop the cover in the next section, and if Erica is more than just an arrogant heiress. Daniel returned to Erica's table with a fresh linen tablecloth, so immaculate it seemed to reflect the light. His movements were precise, almost robotic. His inexpressiveness was his weapon. The waiter's face was the blank canvas onto which Erica projected her own lack of character. She observed him with the casual disdain reserved for objects, not people. This indifference was what Daniel needed most, the certainty that she would never look deep enough to see the millionaire behind the apron. He served the sparkling water and the cupboard with the discretion of a ghost. Erica, without taking her eyes off her smartphone, she made an audible comment to her companion about the slowness of the service, ignoring the fact that Daniel was a meter away from her. "This place," she said, "urgently needs a shock of new money. The service is pathetic. They hire anyone." Daniel gripped the tray handle, feeling the indignation of his invisible colleagues add to his own. This humiliation was no longer personal. It was an insult to the dignity of all workers who honestly sold their time. Millionaire Daniel remembered a lesson from his grandmother, from before his first $1 million even existed. True power lies not in how much you have, but in how little you need to be worthy. Erica, with all her luxury, was living proof that money only amplifies the rot of the soul. He felt a cold satisfaction in his performance. Every cruel comment from Erica, every look of contempt was a point in favor of his revenge. The plan was simple. Let her build her own gallows with her words and her ego. Erica then made her first fatal mistake. She asked for the bill, not hers, but that of her boss, the mysterious investor Daniel was hunting. She asked Daniel to bring it to her, not for her to pay, but for her to review the expenses. As she did so, she extended her arm across the table, revealing a discreet tattoo on her inner wrist, a small 5-pointed star. Daniel froze. He recognized that tattoo from old photographs. It wasn't his boss's tattoo. It was Sophia's tattoo, his missing sister's, the tattoo she got at 15 in an act of youthful rebellion. Daniel's breath hitched. He thought Erica was just a protégé, his right-hand woman. But what if the truth was darker? What if Erica wasn't the secretary or the heiress, but Sophia herself? The millionaire who had disguised himself to hunt a man suddenly realized that his prey might be his own sister, unrecognizable and covered in the armor of power and dirty money. The rusty keychain in his pocket burned. What is more painful? Being humiliated by an enemy, or discovering that the person you're looking for, the one for whom you sold your soul for $1 million, has transformed into the monster you swore to destroy? Will Daniel have the courage to reveal himself now, or will the instinct for revenge be stronger than the blood tie? Comment below if you think Daniel will confront Erica immediately, or if he will wait to understand her connection to Sophia's tattoo. The world spun in slow motion for Daniel. It was no longer the professional humiliation that worried him, but the staggering possibility that the arrogant, money-laden woman sitting 2 meters away from him was his sister, Sophia. The 5-pointed star on Erica's wrist was no coincidence. It was the scar from his childhood, the only mark he had of his missing sister. The truth often doesn't come disguised as a monster, but as such opulent luxury that it becomes unrecognizable. Daniel recoiled from the table, using the excuse of retrieving his notepad. His knees trembled. He had spent 7 years building his fortune, becoming a discreet millionaire, only to hunt down the man who had stolen Sophia. Now he realized that the monster might not be a man, but the very lifestyle that easy money had created, and that this lifestyle had consumed his sister. He remembered the day Sophia told him, with the innocence of a 15-year-old girl, that she wanted a 5-pointed star to remind her that, even in poverty, she would have 5 things: love, hope, faith, dignity, and one day, lots of money. The dissonance was excruciating. Daniel, the clean-energy millionaire, disguised as a poor waiter. Sophia, the orphan, disguised as an arrogant heiress. He needed more than a tattoo to be sure. If she were Sophia, she would remember one thing: the song. They had a lullaby that only the two of them knew, a secret sung on cold nights when there was neither food nor the promise of money. Daniel approached the table again, serving Erica's water. He acted on instinct, a risky decision, but the only one that could pierce the disguise of her arrogance. In an almost inaudible whisper, as he leaned over to fill his glass, he murmured 3 words, the first line of the lullaby. Erica stopped typing. Smartphone. Her body froze. She raised her head. her once cold gaze now pierced by a shadow of confusion and suddenly terror. The panic in her eyes lasted less than a second, but for Daniel, it was the eternity of a response. Erica reacted violently, spilling the glass of water on the tablecloth, not as an accident but as a deliberate act of shock. "Waiter!" she shouted, drawing the attention of the entire room. "You're trembling. What pathetic service. You're embarrassing me. Send your boss to see me now and bring the 500 reais bill I asked for 10 minutes ago." Humiliation was a shield, but millionaire Daniel already had his answer. Revenge would have to wait. The truth, no. Humiliation was the confirmation. She was Sophia. But what transformed the orphan's hope into the heiress's contempt? And how, now that he knows, will Daniel use his money to unravel this mystery without destroying what remains of his sister? Comment below if you think Sophia remembers Daniel and is pretending not to recognize him out of fear, or if she has truly become the villain of this story. The scene of the spilled water replayed in Daniel's mind. The panic in Erica's eyes, which lasted only an instant, was the painful confirmation. The arrogant heiress was Sophia, his missing sister. The man he intended to hunt down because of Sophia's fate was in fact being protected by her. Revenge, which had once been a straight line, now turned into a moral labyrinth. Daniel, the clean energy millionaire, knew he could no longer act only as the humble waiter. He would have to use his other identity, that of power, to protect Sophia without her knowing. In the back of the restaurant, Daniel picked up his work phone. His Casio watch, in fact, was a smartwatch, a modified device connected him to a global security network. In 2 minutes, and with just 3 taps on the screen, he accessed a bank account. Offshore, he transferred an absurd amount of money to the account of a top-secret contact. He was buying information. The first order was to trace Erica Vasconcelos's name and her entire financial and social history, and, crucially, her connection to the loan shark who caused the tragedy years ago. The investigation, funded by his immense wealth, revealed facts that sent a chilling shiver down Daniel's spine. Erica wasn't just a high-ranking employee. She was the loan shark's fiancé, now a tycoon named Hector Soria. Soria had used Sophia's disappearance to force Daniel to sell his first startup at a ridiculously low price, obtaining the initial capital for his own empire. Sophia wasn't lost, she was trapped in a gilded cage built with Daniel's money. The millionaire realized the scale of the game. The loan shark, Hector Soria, was using Sophia, now Erica, as a weapon, a facade of credibility and possibly collateral. Daniel's original plan was to expose and ruin Soria publicly. But if he did that, he would put Sophia in mortal danger, since she was an accomplice or victim of the tycoon's schemes. Daniel could no longer think of revenge. He had to think of rescue. Back in the hall, Daniel served the table next to Erica with an impassive face. The heiress was too busy frantically typing and talking loudly on the phone about acquiring an 8-story building downtown. The irony was cruel. The millionaire serving her was secretly the man who could buy and sell all of Soria's assets, including Erica, in an hour of trading. The difference between them was their purpose. Daniel used money as a shield, Soria as a chain. Still with his apron soiled, Daniel received the encrypted reply from his contact, a compressed file containing the entire transaction history of Erica and Hector Soria. The report contained a single line highlighted in red, a recent transaction of extremely high value involving the transfer of real estate assets to a familiar name. It was a name Daniel hadn't heard in years, a name that changed the entire equation and suggested that Soria's game was about to collapse, and that Sophia might be involved in something even bigger. What is Soria plotting by transferring the money to an old name? And what will Daniel do with this inside information while still wearing his waiter's uniform? Comment below if you think Daniel should reveal himself to Sophia now and ask for help, or if he should act secretly to rescue her from her fiancé's clutches. The name on Soria's financial report, the name of the high-value real estate transaction Daniel had seen in Topic 7, was that of a former mentor of Daniel's, a man he considered almost a father before the tragedy. That man had mysteriously disappeared after being financially ruined by Soria himself years ago. The discovery cast a cold and disturbing light on Hector Soria's plan. He wasn't just accumulating money, he was settling loose ends from his past, using Erica, Sophia, as an intermediary. Millionaire Daniel realized that revenge had become a triple ransom for Sophia, for his mentor, and for justice itself. Daniel needed physical proof, something more concrete than bank transactions. Using the excuse of cleaning Table 3, unoccupied and near Erica's, he installed a high-tech directional microphone, equipment only someone with his immense wealth could acquire without raising suspicion. The waiter's discretion was key. He knew that, in a few minutes, Erica would make a crucial call to Soria, a report on the business meeting she had just had. The millionaire was using his fortune to become a silent spy, acting in plain sight. The captured dialogues were sharp and full of contempt. Erica reported to Soria that she had secured the acquisition of the downtown building, but expressed frustration at having to use the name of Daniel's former mentor on the paperwork. She said, "It's risky, Hector. His money was dirty, and using that name could bring ghosts." Soria's voice, cold and calculating, retorted, "The money is safe, Erica, and the ghosts, they bow to the millionaire. Just complete the transfer tomorrow. This is the price of our freedom and our future." What Soria called freedom was, for Daniel, a prison for Sophia. She was clearly involved in the dirty business, but the hesitation in her voice suggested she wasn't entirely at ease. Millionaire Daniel was trying to decipher the code. Was Soria blackmailing Sophia, or had power and money completely transformed her, making her accept the darkness? He had only 24 hours before the final transfer, and time was slipping away faster than the water Erica had spilled from the glass. He looked at Erica, who was now touching up her makeup, completely oblivious to the wiretap. The 5-pointed star shone in the dim light of the restaurant. Daniel, the waiter, served her coffee, concentrating on keeping his hands steady. He realized that the only way to rescue Sophia was to risk everything. He would need to use his millionaire power in a way Soria would never expect, a public, dramatic, and financial move that would blow the charade to pieces. But to get revenge, Daniel would have to step out of the shadows. How will millionaire Daniel Guerra, the man who made $5 million with technology, reveal himself to Sophia and Erica without causing them to flee? And what would be the moral cost of this revelation for Sophia, who is now using the enemy's money? Comment below if you think Daniel should reveal himself during Erica's dinner, or on an even bigger stage like the media. The decision was made. Daniel could no longer wait for Erica's final money transfer. The risk of Sophia erasing all traces was too high, and Sophia, Erica, was in the eye of the storm. The millionaire wouldn't use the media, not for now. He would use Erica's own environment, the only place where her power was vulnerable, the financial market. Still with his apron stained with coffee, Daniel briefly withdrew to the storeroom, where his smartwatch, the modified device, transformed into a command center. In 30 seconds of pure adrenaline, he accessed the market of commodities, and he made a series of financial moves that would have sent any Wall Street analyst into a panic. He not only liquidated the shares of Soria's former mentor that were being transferred by Erica, but also initiated an aggressive short-selling operation against the core assets of the tycoon's conglomerate. It was the waiter's invisible attack. The effect was immediate and violent, though silent in the room. The narration explains that 10 blocks away, Soria's trading desk was ablaze with monitors flashing red. The price of his shares plummeted, swallowing hundreds of millions of dollars in minutes. Soria couldn't understand. It was a coordinated, surgical attack, executed by an entity that seemed to know every weak point of his empire. He thought of competitors. He would never think of the waiter, Daniel. Back in the room, Daniel was serving Erica a glass of Bordeaux wine. She was on the phone with Soria, and her once arrogant expression was now tense and pale. The waiter listened to her trembling voice. "What's happening, Hector? Our stocks. They're in free fall. We've lost almost 20%. This isn't normal." Soria, on the other end of the line, shouted, "It's an attack, Erica, a dirty money attack. Cancel tomorrow's transfer immediately. Cancel everything. I need liquidity." Millionaire Daniel smiled inwardly. His move had worked. The price of Sophia's rescue was the financial chaos of her tormentor. However, the victory was bittersweet. Erica, her sister, was now under immense pressure, and the panic in her voice was genuine. Money had corrupted her, but fear was humanizing her again. The 5-pointed star on her wrist seemed to tremble. Erica hung up the phone, throwing it violently onto the table. She turned to Daniel, the waiter, her eyes bloodshot with anger. "You!" she hissed. "Oh, you're useless. Bring me espresso strong, and fast. And if you spill it, I swear you'll pay for it." The threat was empty for the millionaire who had just cost him $500 million, but for the waiter, it was a warning. Daniel walked away, but took with him the most precious fragment of the conversation, the order to cancel the transfer. The first victory was his, and the next step would be the final confrontation. But what will Soria do now that his empire is under attack? And does Erica's order to cancel the money transfer save Daniel's former mentor, or does it only delay the inevitable? Is the millionaire Daniel sure he's safe, or has Soria already realized that the attack came from within? Leave a comment below if you think Daniel should get his final revenge on Soria, or if he should focus solely on saving Sophia. Night fell, bringing with it the scent of ozone and the promise of a storm. Daniel, after having liquidated millions of Soria's money on the market, felt the weight of invisibility more than ever. His disguise as a waiter was effective, but dangerous. He knew the financial attack would blind Soria for a few hours, but wouldn't silence him forever. The millionaire needed a plan to guarantee Soria's safety before Soria discovered the origin of the scam. The time he had gained was the most valuable thing his money could ever buy. During the break, in the cramped locker room, Daniel reviewed his plan. He would buy the restaurant's debt in the name of becoming the secret owner. This would give him absolute authority over the place and the perfect protection for the final showdown. He would make the revelation during the charity auction that Soria and Erica were co-organizing next week, a public stage where Soria's downfall would be televised and undeniable. It was the perfect revenge, public and financed with his own money. He looked at Sophia's keychain, thinking about her fragility under Soria's control. The wealth he had built, the initial million that came from sacrifice, would now be used to undo the harm done. But the reflection was brutally interrupted. His co-worker, Pedro, the chef who called him Mummy, approached with a strange look. Pedro never interacted with Daniel. The chef suddenly ignored the oil stain on his own apron and whispered, "Daniel, you have to get out of here now." Pedro's tone was urgent, devoid of mockery. Daniel stopped, surprised. Pedro continued, nervously glancing at the door. "I received an anonymous phone call 10 minutes ago. They said that if I saw you here again, they would burn the restaurant down. They said you were sniffing where you shouldn't be, and that your money wouldn't pay the bill this time." The millionaire knew immediately. Soria had reacted. Not with financial tactics, but with violence. The loan shark had lost the money, but not his predatory instinct. The threat of arson wasn't directed at the building, but at Daniel, a way to force him out of the game. But what was most disturbing was the source of the information. How did Soria know who Daniel was and why he was in the restaurant? Daniel only used his given name and had no known connections to the place. He looked at Pedro, who was trembling with fear, and at the restaurant, now silent and empty. His plan to buy the restaurant was no longer an elegant revenge. It was a matter of life or death. He had to act before dawn. But if Soria has already discovered his disguise and is using his colleagues against him, how will the millionaire manage to complete Sophia's rescue? And who, inside the restaurant, could be the spy who revealed his identity and put everyone in danger? Comment below if you think Daniel should immediately reveal himself to Pedro to ask for help, or if he should flee to protect the restaurant. Pedro's warning echoed in Daniel's mind. The threat of fire wasn't empty. Soria wasn't playing fair. The millionaire realized that his disguise, which had been his shield, was now his greatest vulnerability and a risk to the innocent, like the chef himself who was trying to save him. The time for playing waiter was over. Daniel acted with the precision and speed that only the power of billions can provide. He turned to Pedro, and for the first time, Daniel's gaze wasn't that of a tired employee, but that of a predator in a suit. The change was so abrupt that Pedro took a step back, confused. Daniel couldn't reveal everything, but he needed the chef's trust. "Pedro," Daniel said, his voice deep and calm, "I know what you did, and I'll make sure you and your family never have to worry about money again." Pedro, frowning, thought Daniel had gone mad. In 5 minutes, Daniel was out of the restaurant, but not before carrying out 2 crucial actions with his smartwatch. The first move was to activate a state-of-the-art surveillance system inside the building, financed by his fortune, which would monitor any suspicious activity. The second was even more audacious. He bought the restaurant's full insurance for 5 times its market value, using a shell company to settle the transaction instantly. If a fire broke out, Soria wouldn't touch him. Daniel's money would absorb the blow. As he drove to his mansion, the luxury of his car and the silence of the bulletproof glass were a stark contrast to the smell of cooking oil that still clung to his uniform. The narration explains that the millionaire was now in his element. He had removed his apron and replaced it with hunting attire, the absolute power of money. He activated his home office, where 3 giant screens displayed financial data, security reports, and Sophia Erica's history. Time was critical, and the $1 million Daniel had spent on information was about to pay the ultimate dividend. Daniel reviewed Erica's history, her arrogance, her connections with Soria, her coldness. He needed something to make him understand his sister's transformation, something to justify why Sophia's love had been replaced by a thirst for money and power. He returned to email an old message, intercepted by his security system, sent by Sophia to Soria years ago. The message was short and desperate, a plea for Soria to let her go. But Soria's response was the lowest blow of all. He had legal control over Sophia's life. The revelation was devastating. Soria wasn't just using Daniel's money to blackmail Sophia. He had forged documents giving him legal guardianship of Sophia when she was only 17, exploiting her orphan status. Sophia wasn't with Soria out of greed. She was legally his prisoner, and his money was the only bargaining chip for her freedom. Millionaire Daniel stopped breathing. He had judged his sister, but she was the predator's greatest victim. And now, what will Millionaire Daniel do with this overwhelming truth? Will he expose Soria and risk Sophia's legal security, or will he use his money and influence to secretly overturn the guardianship? Leave a comment below if you think revenge should be replaced by immediate legal redress. The Midas screenwriter begins topic 12, delving deeper into arc through the plan revealed. Daniel channels his grief and his millionaire power to create a high-stakes legal and financial strategy to free Sophia, acting under immense time pressure. Topic 12. Daniel's office, a fortress of glass and steel, had become the center of a silent rescue operation. The truth about Sophia's legal guardianship, the fact that she was a prisoner and not an accomplice, had transformed cold revenge into a desperate mission of love. Millionaire Daniel Guerra could no longer waste time attacking Sophia's actions. He needed a lawyer who could annul forged documents and rescue his sister's dignity. Within 10 minutes of discovering the secret, Daniel activated his elite legal team in Switzerland. He didn't need defense lawyers. He needed document hunters, capable of unearthing the legal guardianship fraud that Soria had orchestrated years ago. The cost was stratospheric, an amount of money that would make most governments hesitate, but for Daniel, it was merely the fee to get his family back. Time was running out, and Soria's charity auction, the stage for the final showdown, was only 3 days away. The complexity of the fraud was astonishing. Soria had used the name of Daniel's former mentor, the same one involved in the Topic 7 real estate transaction, to act as a false witness in Sophia's guardianship paperwork. This not only put Sophia at legal risk, but also exposed Soria's network of complicity. Millionaire Daniel realized that Soria was setting a perfect trap. If Sophia tried to escape or was exposed, Soria would use her as a scapegoat, claiming she had stolen the mentor's money and name. Daniel needed a masterstroke that would dismantle both Soria's guardianship and financial empire at once, without involving the police, giving Soria time to escape. He would use the charity auction itself as bait. His plan: to force Soria to buy back a rare piece of art, an object of incalculable sentimental value to the tycoon, at such a high price that he would have to liquidate key assets, weakening his legal defense. Money would be the ultimate weapon. To do this, Daniel needed an aggressive initial bid at the auction. He called his boss, Holding, and he gave the order. "No matter the price," Daniel said, his voice hoarse with fatigue. "This item has to be auctioned off to Hector Soria, and it will cost all the money he can raise in 12 hours. The starting bid will be $10 million. The move was audacious, a bluff financed by a gigantic fortune. While reviewing the bids, Daniel received a new report from his surveillance team at the restaurant. The camera installed at table 3 had captured something disturbing. Erica, the prisoner with the 5-pointed star, had returned to the restaurant in the dead of night, alone. She wasn't there to eat or drink. She was rummaging through the trash, looking for something she had discarded that afternoon. Something that Daniel, the waiter, had cleaned up and thrown away. What was Erica looking for in the trash? Was it a clue about the guardianship fraud, or something that would directly link her to the stolen money? And Daniel's order to spend 10 million to start the auction. Will Sophia fall into the trap, or will she realize she's being manipulated by the millionaire? Comment below what object you think Erica was looking for and why it's so important. The image of Sophia rummaging through the restaurant's trash can, captured by Daniel's surveillance system, was yet another blow to the millionaire's soul. He could no longer see his sister merely as a victim. That desperate act suggested she was actively hiding something, and what she sought wasn't money, but something that connected her to the past Soria was trying to bury. Daniel enlarged the images, using software's forensic experts. Funded by his fortune, identified what Erica was looking for: a crumpled napkin she had used to wipe her lips after coffee. Why would a used piece of paper be worth the risk of being seen? Daniel sent a field team to retrieve the restaurant's trash from that night, ordering them to find the napkin at any cost, paying whatever it took. Daniel's money was now cleaning up his sister's mess, in a search for a truth that could save her or condemn her. The analysis of the napkin, done in Daniel's private laboratory, revealed the most disturbing clue yet. There were no notes or secret codes. There was only a small lipstick stain and a tiny remnant of fabric, almost invisible to the naked eye, belonging to a hospital uniform. The lipstick color, a dark, cool shade, was the same one Erica had worn. The hospital stain, however, was the key. It meant Sophia had recently been in a medical setting, and she had desperately tried to destroy the evidence of that encounter. Millionaire Daniel, sitting in his marble office, felt a chill. Why would Erica, the tycoon's fiancée, be secretly visiting a hospital and then discarding the evidence? The most logical answer was that she was ill. But the pain in her eyes when Daniel whispered the lullaby in topic 6 wasn't the pain of physical illness, it was the pain of guilt. He used his financial access to cross-reference data from all the private hospitals in the region with Erica Soria's payment frequency, tracking suspicious expenses. The answer came in an encrypted report. Erica was paying in cash, outside of her health plan system, for the hospitalization of an elderly patient in a modest hospital 200 kilometers from the city. The patient's name wasn't familiar, but the admission history was shocking. The patient had been admitted 7 years ago, around the same time Sophia disappeared. Millionaire Daniel realized that Erica's fortune wasn't just being used for luxury, but to cover up for and care for someone. He immediately called his field contact, the former mentor ruined by Soria, who now secretly worked for Daniel. "Go to St. Clair Hospital immediately," Daniel ordered. "Find out who this elderly patient is and if Erica visited her, and don't use any traceable cash or credit cards." The man promised the discretion that only loyalty and a desire for justice could buy. Millionaire Daniel had a new target, a new mystery. Who is this elderly patient that Erica, Sophia, is keeping secret with her money? Could she be Sophia's real victim? And will Daniel's search for the truth at the hospital expose Sophia and compromise the rescue plan that was already underway? Leave a comment below if you think this patient is Daniel and Sophia's mother, or if she's a key piece in uncovering the fraud. Daniel's field contact, the disgraced former mentor, acted with the discretion of a ghost. He infiltrated St. Clair Hospital, a no-frills place ignored by the high society of millionaires, but full of secrets. Daniel's order was clear: discover the identity of the elderly patient. Within hours, the former mentor sent Daniel the admission form and a discreet photograph of the woman. Millionaire Daniel stopped breathing when he saw the photo. It wasn't his mother, but it was someone equally central to his grief. The patient was the mother of Hector Soria, the magnate himself. She had been in a coma for 7 years, admitted around the same time Sophia disappeared. The name on the payment record? Erica Vasconcelos. Sophia's, Erica's fortune was used not only to keep her legally imprisoned, but to pay the medical expenses of her future mother-in-law, whom Soria had abandoned. Erica's money was the ransom for a life, the price of her own freedom. She was trapped in an impossible moral dilemma, caring for the mother of the man who oppressed her in order to survive. Millionaire Daniel Guerra, seated on his throne of billions, felt a wave of cold revulsion for Soria. The tycoon had not only stolen Daniel's sister and the name of his mentor, he had abandoned his own mother, using her as an anchor to blackmail Sofia. Soria feared that his mother, who had disowned him for his cruelty, would awaken and reveal the secrets of his past. Erica's money was, ironically, the veil that concealed Soria's moral decay. Daniel perceived the evil genius of the trap. If Sofia tried to escape, Soria would cut off the hospital's funding, killing his own mother and blaming Sofia. The five-pointed star on Erica's wrist no longer represented hope. It represented blackmail, the forced oath of loyalty to a monster. Daniel's plan changed drastically. He needed not only to annul Sofia's guardianship, he needed a final act that would expose Soria's darkest side on the auction stage. With the help of his money and network of contacts, Daniel obtained Soria's mother's medical records. There was a shocking clause in the matriarch's will. She had disinherited Hector Soria and left a majority stake in a key asset to the hospital, on the condition that the hospital never reveal her son's identity. The millionaire saw an opening. Soria needed the hospital's silence more than she needed his money. Daniel's final move wouldn't just be a bid at the auction. He would use his vast wealth to secretly buy St. Clair Hospital, becoming Soria's mother's new boss, and consequently the keeper of Soria's secret. The purchase would be finalized an hour before the auction. The millionaire waiter would make his move on stage and backstage simultaneously. But if Daniel buys the hospital, he will have power over Soria's mother. Will he use this information to blackmail Soria? Or will he use the money to force a confession and save Sofia? And if Sofia finds out that Daniel bought the hospital, how will she react to this new form of control? Comment below if millionaire Daniel is acting like a hero, or if he's becoming as manipulative as Soria. Daniel's wristwatch showed 24 hours to the auction, and the control room in his mansion was buzzing. The millionaire hadn't slept for 2 days, but the adrenaline of the imminent rescue kept him awake. The acquisition of St. Clair Hospital wasn't a mere investment. It was the purchase of Hector Soria's Achilles heel. Daniel needed the purchase transaction completed and registered 30 minutes before the auction, ensuring he would legally be the new guardian of Soria's secret, his comatose mother. The value of the hospital purchase required the liquidation of a significant portion of Daniel's assets, a cost of hundreds of millions of dollars that he paid without hesitation. The millionaire was emptying his fortune to buy justice and freedom for his sister. The act itself was a powerful metaphor. He was using money to dismantle the machine that money had created, reversing the evil of years past. The complexity of the operation required Daniel to review every clause of Soria's mother's will. He discovered that if Hector Soria's identity were revealed to the public as the son who abandoned her, the hospital would inherit all of the magnate's remaining assets, effectively bankrupting him. Daniel's move wasn't just to buy the hospital. It was to ensure that, at the right moment, he would have the authority to make the legal disclosure that would trigger Soria's bankruptcy. While reviewing the documents, Daniel received an urgent phone call from his field contact at the hospital. The tone of voice was altered. The former mentor had intercepted a private nurse of Soria's, paid by Erica, who was preparing to transport the elderly patient to an unknown location. The order came directly from Soria: move his mother before the auction, fearing that some ghost from the past would come to claim her. Soria shrewdly sensed the net closing in, but he didn't imagine the hunter's identity. Daniel's plan was at risk. If Soria's mother were moved, Daniel would lose control of the situation, and the leverage for moral blackmail would disappear. Daniel, the millionaire, issued an immediate counter-order, injecting an absurd sum of money into the hospital to hire an elite security team to protect the patient from any unauthorized transfer. The narration explains that the waiter was literally buying the life of his enemy's mother to save his sister. With security reinforced, Daniel turned his attention to the auction. He dialed his number, holding, and he confirmed the initial bid of $10 million for the rare piece of art, the bait that would force Soria to expose his liquidity. Daniel had his strategy. He would be the invisible millionaire in the auction audience, and Soria would be the target who, to save his reputation, would have to spend the money necessary to fall into Daniel's legal trap. But what will happen if Soria attends the auction with Sophia, Erica? Will Daniel be able to maintain his focus on financial revenge and legal rescue, or will the thrill of seeing his sister, now an arrogant heiress, force him to break cover on stage and risk everything? Comment below if you think Daniel should have a private meeting with Sophia before the auction to warn her, or if he should maintain absolute secrecy until the last second. The auction hall radiated cold luxury. Crystal chandeliers reflected the glint of billions in cash and jewels scattered across the audience. Daniel was there, unrecognizable. He no longer wore the soiled apron but an impeccably tailored suit, expensive but discreetly neutral. The perfect uniform for a millionaire who wanted to be invisible. He sat in the last row, watching Hector Soria and Erica, Sophia, in the first, occupying the center of attention. The silence of the room was the prelude to the storm that Daniel had carefully orchestrated. 20 meters away, Sophia, dressed in a ball gown that Daniel knew cost 10 years' salary for a waiter, looked like an ice queen. She smiled for the flashes, a mask of arrogance that up close Daniel could see shattered in her eyes. She was tense, certainly aware of the financial turmoil caused by Daniel's invisible attack and acting under the pressure of Soria's legal guardianship. The millionaire felt a tightness in his chest. Revenge grew more difficult with each false smile from her sister. The auctioneer began the sale of the rare piece of art that Daniel would use as bait, an artifact of incalculable symbolic value to Soria. The initial bid was made by a holding Daniel's offer, $10 million. The audience murmured, shocked by the aggression. The narration explains that this money wasn't to buy the piece, but rather to buy Soria's attention and panic. Daniel knew that the magnate, obsessed with image and prestige, wouldn't allow the item to be auctioned off to a stranger. Soria, irritated, immediately raised the sign, 15 million. Daniel, without moving a muscle, activated his second, holding in the electronic bidding system, 17 million. The bidding war began, swift and brutal, financed by the waiter's money. Soria grew increasingly red-faced, frantically consulting his financial team. Each bid Soria made drained his liquidity, preparing him for the final legal blow, the annulment of Sophia's guardianship and the exposure of her abandoned mother in the hospital. In this moment of chaos, Erica turned toward the exit door, panic gripping her face. Daniel the millionaire realized she wasn't worried about Soria's money, but about the threat the auction posed to the hospital's secrecy. Her gaze met Daniel's for a split second. She didn't recognize him. But as she turned, a small scar Daniel had never seen before just below the 5-pointed star tattoo became visible. It wasn't a fight scar. It looked like a surgical scar. What did this scar mean? Was Sophia truly ill, and was the hospital visit not just for Soria's mother? Millionaire Daniel feared that while he was focused on financial revenge, his sister's life was at risk for a far more personal and desperate reason than legal guardianship. The hunt was about to take another turn. And now faced with this new and urgent discovery, will Daniel interrupt the auction and risk the exposure, or will he proceed with the financial plan, ignoring Sophia's health to guarantee her freedom? Comment below if you think Daniel should immediately expose himself to ask about the scar. The newly discovered scar on Sophia's wrist, just below the 5-pointed star, was the only thing Daniel could see. The auction, the money, the revenge, Soria, it all became a distant noise. That small surgical mark confirmed his fear. Erica's secret visit to the hospital wasn't just for Soria's mother. It was for herself. Sophia's wealth was a facade for a silent illness, a personal tragedy hidden beneath the luxury. Millionaire Daniel realized that time was not an ally. It was an executioner. Soria, in a fit of rage and financial desperation, made the final bid for the artwork, $30 million. The auctioneer brought down the gavel, and Soria won the piece but lost a large part of its liquidity, exactly as Daniel had planned. The financial revenge was complete, but Daniel's personal revenge had died the instant he saw the scar. He could no longer ruin Soria publicly without first ensuring Sophia received treatment. 2 rows away, Daniel activated the recording mode on his smartwatch modified. He knew he needed irrefutable proof to overturn Sophia's guardianship, without causing public panic. Using his financial knowledge, he remotely accessed Soria's cell phone, an intrusion funded by his cybersecurity fortune, and transferred a crucial audio file to the auction's public documents folder, disguised as proof of payment for Soria's $30 million bid. The audio file was a recording of Soria's threat, made 3 days earlier, in which he blackmailed Sophia into continuing to pay her mother's hospital expenses, claiming that if she ran away, he would cut off the money and let her die. The millionaire waiter had planted the bomb that would not only prove the guardianship fraud, but also Soria's moral cruelty, exposing him in the middle of his own charity event. However, Daniel didn't wait for the audio to explode. His focus was on Sophia. He stood up, breaking protocol, and began to walk slowly toward her table. The room was silent, the expectation hanging over the final bid. Daniel was no longer the invisible millionaire. He was just Daniel, the desperate brother. Sophia, feeling his heavy gaze, turned. Their eyes met, and Daniel didn't hesitate. He spoke 3 words that only they could understand, the last words of the lullaby he had whispered in Topic 6. "Star, I'm here." Sophia froze. Panic was absolute. She looked at her brother, the millionaire disguised as a stranger, and then at Soria, who was still celebrating his false victory. She knew the charade was over. The guardianship, the money, the arrogance, everything had crumbled. The scar on her wrist seemed to throb under the chandelier's light. And now, the audio recording of Soria's blackmail is about to be played, and Sophia has recognized her brother. What will Soria do when he realizes that the waiter who served him was the millionaire who ruined him, and that his fiancée is about to be rescued? And how will Daniel get Sophia out of the auction before Soria realizes what's happening and resorts to violence as a last resort? Comment below if you think Sophia will pretend not to know him to protect Daniel's plan, or if she will fall into her brother's arms. Time stood still for Sophia. The 3 words whispered by Daniel, "Star, I'm here," were the code she hadn't heard in 7 years, irrefutable proof that her brother was alive, rich, and there. The mask of arrogance that money had forged on her face crumbled in terror and relief. She began to cry, but Soria, oblivious to the family gathering, turned to her, triumphant at having won the $30 million bid. At that exact moment, Daniel's bomb exploded. The auction's sound system, which was supposed to play the announcement of the next lot, was invaded by the audio file the millionaire had planted. Hector Soria's voice filled the hall, loud and cold. "If you run away, Erica, I'll cut off your funding. The old woman dies in the clinic. $5,000 per month and you will be the killer. Keep paying the money or she dies." The shock was absolute. The murmurs of the audience turned to a silence of revulsion, and then to a chorus of indignation. Soria turned as white as the linen table that Daniel used to clean. He realized what had happened. He had been betrayed. His primal instinct was to blame the only vulnerable person. He grabbed Sophia's arm, pressing the scar near the 5-pointed star, and shouted, "You! It was you! You ungrateful bitch! You stole my money and betrayed me!" Daniel acted with lightning speed. In 3 steps, he was beside Soria. The millionaire Daniel, who had spent months pretending to be a waiter, applied to Soria a force that had been the result of 7 years of pent-up hatred. He pushed the tycoon away from Sophia, protecting her. Soria staggered, his face contorted with fury. He couldn't understand who this man was who dared to touch him. "Who the hell are you? Get out of here, you poor wretch!" Soria roared. Daniel looked directly into the predator's eyes and delivered the final blow, with the deep, authoritative voice he never used in the restaurant. "I am Daniel Guerra," he declared, and the narration explains that the name Daniel Guerra was synonymous with billions and power in the tech and clean energy circles. "And I bought this auction, your restaurant's debt, and your mother's hospital 30 minutes ago. You have no more money, Soria, and you no longer have custody of her." Sophia broke down in tears of relief, finally free from legal guardianship. The police, called by Daniel's security team, paid with his money, stormed the salon to arrest Soria for guardianship fraud and blackmail. Soria tried to escape, but was restrained. Daniel knelt before Sophia. "I found you, Estrella," he whispered, touching her scar. He realized, however, that the rescue was not complete. Sophia's silent illness was still a threat. But is millionaire Daniel sure that Soria has no more money to use against them? And what will the police do with Sophia, now that she has been exposed as an accomplice, even if forced, in Soria's fraud? Comment below if you think Daniel should use his money to get her out of the country immediately, or if he should present her to his lawyer so she can tell the whole truth. The auction hall, once a stage of opulence, had transformed into a scene of financial crime and personal rescue. While the police took away Hector Soria, the dismantled tycoon, Daniel held Sophia, who trembled. The five-pointed star on her wrist seemed to glow with a new light, the light of freedom. But the joy was brief. Daniel's touch on her scar, proof of her silent illness, rekindled the fear. The millionaire could no longer use money merely as a weapon. He needed to use it as a cure. Daniel led her outside, through the curious gazes of the shocked millionaires. The scent of expensive perfume and lies was replaced by the cool, damp night air. "Sophia," he whispered, using the name she had tried to bury beneath Erica's facade. "The scar, the hospital. What did Soria do to you?" Sophia confessed through tears. The illness was serious, a heart problem requiring urgent surgery. Soria knew. He used her condition to force her to cooperate, threatening to withhold treatment money and hospital expenses from his own mother, leaving them both on the brink of death. Soria's cruelty was deeper than Daniel had imagined. The millionaire immediately activated his health contingency plan. He used his influence and vast wealth to contact a private jet, which would be ready within an hour to take them to a state-of-the-art hospital where the world's best cardiologist was already on standby. Time was everything. The money finally was being used to save a life, not just to buy revenge. While they waited for the armored security car, Sophia asked a question that cut Daniel. "How did you get all this money?" Daniel looked at the floor, at the reflection of his millionaire image in the marble floor. He told the truth in a few words. The first $1 million came from a risky and morally grey deal, forced by desperation and Soria's blackmail. His money was, in essence, the product of the same crime that imprisoned Sophia. This revelation created a new barrier. Daniel wasn't a flawless hero. He was a man tainted by the money he sought. Sophia embraced him, understanding. "We were both victims of money and darkness, Daniel, but you used your part to save me, and that's what matters." The siblings' union was the true prize, not Soria's bankruptcy. However, as the security car arrived, a disturbing detail emerged. The narration explains that, despite being imprisoned, Soria still had one last trump card. Daniel's security team alerted him. The rare piece of art, acquired by Soria at auction for $30 million, was not just an artifact. Inside its pedestal was a secret time capsule. And this capsule contained Soria's confession, recorded on video, which not only incriminated Soria, but also implicated Sophia in the embezzlement of millions of dollars from the company, a security measure Soria had prepared in case he was betrayed. The time capsule would be opened and broadcast worldwide in 2 hours. Millionaire Daniel had rescued Sophia from physical danger, but Soria, from prison, was about to ruin her legally. Daniel now needs his money and his speed to intercept the transmission of Soria's confession and save Sophia's reputation. But with only 2 hours left, will he succeed, or will Soria's money win the final battle? Comment below if Daniel should hack into the transmission network to stop the video, or if he should let Sophia tell the truth first. The clock showed 1 hour and 45 minutes to the worldwide transmission of the time capsule. Millionaire Daniel and Sophia were on the private jet, flying towards the specialized clinic where her heart surgery would be performed. The luxury of the aircraft was the only place where Daniel could use his money to buy time and security. But the tension in the air was palpable. Soria's recorded confession, which incriminated Sophia in the embezzlement of millions, threatened to destroy her reputation and throw her in prison, even after she had been rescued. Mid-flight, Daniel set up a command center, Hacker in the booth. He knew that hacking into Soria's global broadcast network would be risky, but it was the only way to save his sister's honor. He had to act in the dark. As he typed complex codes, Sophia, watching her brother, made a crucial decision. She realized that the darkness surrounding them was the legacy of dirty money. "Stop, Daniel," Sophia said, her voice firm. "Don't hack. Let the video be broadcast." Daniel stopped typing, shocked. Sophia continued, "I was an accomplice, even if forced. I diverted the money to pay for his mother's hospital. If you cover this up with your fortune, we won't be any different from Soria. I want to be truly free, and that means facing the truth." The millionaire Daniel realized that Sophia had grown more in 3 days of freedom than in 7 years of false luxury. She chose dignity over the secrecy of money. Daniel, instead of hacking the network, did the opposite. He used his money to buy advertising space on all the news channels that would broadcast Soria's confession. In 15 minutes, he would be live, ready to counter Soria's narrative with his own. The millionaire wasn't going to hide the truth from Sophia. He was going to control her, turning her into a ransom witness. At the exact moment when Soria's recorded confession began to be broadcast, revealing Erica's involvement in the embezzlement, Daniel appeared in a pop-up emergency. He took full responsibility. He didn't lie, but he controlled the angle. He exposed the guardianship document, the blackmail, Sophia's illness, and the abandonment of Soria's mother at the hospital. Daniel turned Soria's video into his own public condemnation. The payback wasn't just prison, it was the total destruction of his reputation, financed by Daniel's money. Millionaire Daniel and Sophia, side by side, watched Soria be ridiculed and legally annihilated in real time. Sophia would be investigated for embezzlement, but with Daniel's testimony and the guardianship evidence, she would have a chance at redemption, to prove that she acted under duress. The revenge was complete, and Sophia's freedom was guaranteed. But can Daniel's tainted money, which bought revenge and ransom, ever buy peace of mind for the siblings? By choosing the truth about the luxury and protection of Daniel's fortune, has Sophia truly freed herself from the weight of the past, or are she and her brother destined to live with the shadow of money that came from darkness? Comment below if you think Daniel and Sophia will become examples of redemption, or if his fortune will become the next curse.